Hello everybody, wherever you are and whenever you are. We're back here with another deck tech for a blue-white mid-range style deck. This deck is modeled off of a deck that a friend of the blue-white X mid-range / control community played some months ago. Oren Lagzila, I think his last name is pronounced. Anyway, so what we have here today is a blue-white Emeria Titan deck, and yes, I do realize that this is probably not the time to be playing around with a deck like this with a lot of incidental graveyard hate in the format, trying to stop some of the more linear broken decks. But I was thinking about this deck quite a bit recently, and someone actually commented on one of the blue-white mid-range matches that I played not too long ago. They commented that about that Lone Missionary versus Dredge was kind of interesting and stuff like that, and gave us some legs. And so, you know what, we're just gonna, it's a new year, we're gonna go ahead and just play this deck. And I do apologize for the lapse in content there for a bit. My about week and a half hiatus kind of turned into another week, just because life is extremely hectic for me right now, both with work and with my my personal life. But anyway, yeah, let's give this deck a spin here and see what we can do. So I will say right off the bat that, again, this deck is pretty much a copy and paste from Mr. Oren's list that he piloted months ago, except for a slight change in the sideboard that I will cover when we get there. So once again, like most of our blue-white creations here, we start off with our Path to Exile just as our removal suite here. But then the deck kind of plays some interesting cards here. So we are hinging pretty heavily on some Enter the Battlefield triggers in this deck, and you'll see why in a moment if you're not familiar with how this deck operates. So we have the Lone Missionary, it's a 2/1 for 2 that comes in and gains us 4 life, so useful just kind of in general, as well as Wall of Omens, a familiar face, or familiar surface rather, I guess, if you've been paying attention to the previous blue-white mid-range decks we've been playing. Comes in, draws a card, nice blocker, buys us some time, etc., etc. And we also, Spreading Seas. I'm not sure how relevant this card is in the format right now at the moment. But it does draw a card when it comes in, and sometimes it can just kind of get our opponent a little bit. And combined with Crucible of Worlds / Ghost Quarter, like I said, I'm not totally sold on this card. If I had a little more time going into this video, maybe I would try and find a replacement for this card, but it's what we got for right now. So then we also play Flickerwisp, which can kind of double up on some of our Enter the Battlefield effects here between Lone Missionary, Seas, and Wall of Omens. And it also pairs interestingly with Detention Sphere and Spreading Seas, in the fact that it can reset, so to speak, one of those targets. So if we Detention Sphered away some of our opponent's Lingering Souls tokens or Goblin tokens or something like that, we can use Flickerwisp to basically recycle this Detention Sphere and put it onto a new, more relevant permanent. I have a couple of Gideon of the Trials in here, again, just to kind of hedge against some of the more aggressive decks. And as you will see here in a moment, this converted mana cost of 3 is kind of like the golden number here for this deck, 3 and below. Court Hussar is an interesting card that doesn't really see play anywhere else. But Court Hussar comes into the battlefield. You can look at the top 3 cards, put one into your hand and the rest on the bottom. So it's kind of like a little Anticipate on a body there. But then when it comes into play, you must pay a white, or else it gets sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. So sometimes that is more or less relevant depending on the matchup. As I mentioned, we have a Crucible of Worlds to pair with our Ghost Quarter. Then we have some sweepers to try and keep the more aggressive decks at bay. A 1/of Jace the Mind Sculptor, just because it's Jace. Now we get to the real engine of the deck here. So Sun Titan is a card that is part of the Titan cycle from, I believe, originally from M11 or M13, 12 or whatever, something around in there. You've probably seen Primeval Titan before, but this is the White Titan. And the White Titan has Vigilance here, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can return a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So basically, when we play a Titan, or whenever it attacks, we can return any of our other permanents, other than Jace, from the graveyard to the battlefield. So that type of recursion is pretty sweet. This deck really leans on the graveyard as a powerful resource here. And it also pairs with the namesake land of the deck, Emeria the Sky Ruin. So Emeria is a land that when you have it in play, if you have 7 or more planes, notably Emeria is not planes, you can return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this deck is all about graveyard recursion, and now you probably see why I say it's probably not the best time to play the deck, but it always looked like a lot of fun, and it's a deck I've been itching to get to try out here. So we're gonna run it. We're gonna run it through a league and just kind of see what we can do, see what fun lines we come up against. It's one of these really sweet inevitability style decks. And then so of course, since we need those 7 planes in order to get our Emeria going, we of course are very heavy on the planes. We play 6 basic planes, as well as 3 copies of Hallowed Fountain and a Prairie stream, as well as an Irrigated Farmland, which of course can cycle. And you can also either get back with Crucible of Worlds or with a Sun Titan trigger. So the deck's just a lot of triggers, a lot of value. If you're a lover of value, then this is a deck for you. Sideboard is pretty straightforward here, so we just have some of our catch-all white removal spells for some troublesome permanents. We have our Stony Silences to bring in, settle the Wreckage against other creature decks. And then we have a little control counter magic package here, also good against Tron to bring in, because I'm assuming that the Tron matchup probably isn't great for here, though we do play 4 field and the Ghost Quarter plus the Crucible of Worlds, so it's not all bad. The Damping Sphere can at least help us slow down again certain decks here, and so here's where I deviated a little bit from the sideboard, which again, I think it was almost half a year ago that Oren played this deck, so it's definitely necessary and probably needs more tuning than this even, but just the down and dirty here. I put in 2 Relic of Progenitus just because while we don't want to run just Rest in Peace, because again that shuts off pretty much our entire value engine, so we don't run Rest in Peace, but I did want some way to interact with the degenerate graveyard decks that are running rampant out there in Modern right now. So I brought in 2 Relic, and I believe I shaved there was originally a 4th Lone Missionary in the sideboard, and a Sorceress Spyglass. So we're going to run 2 Relic in those places, but that is the deck. So stay tuned, and we will jump into a Modern League here and see what we can do.